first of all, I said, I want you to take this check back. I don't even remember what the secretary's name was, but back to whoever she was. And I said, I want you to just agree with me that you're going to try to trust me and believe that I'm not here to take his side or to attack you or anything else. But if we're going to accomplish anything, this has to be done out of a love and trust relationship. I said, we're part of the family of the Lord. It's not really about your church or my church. It's about helping y'all. And she said, okay, okay. And you know what? It was a whole different attitude from that point forward. And at the conclusion of 2 or 3 or maybe 4, I can't remember, sessions, they really reported back to me. About 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the actual woman, and she said things are going so much better. We've really made a lot of progress, and she apologized again, you know. But anyway, so, you know, as we grow in the Lord, we get beyond our own emotions in counseling, because it is sometimes easy to get emotional. I've been in counseling sessions where I found out the father was molesting a child. I have been in counseling sessions where I found out he was beating the wife. I'm talking nearly to death, and it had been going on for years. And I wanted to come out from behind my desk and just work on him a while. You know what I mean? I really did. I didn't want to have any more words. I had something else for him. And I mean, it was just, my flesh would just rise up, and I knew on the one hand, God wants to fix this problem. That's why they're here. But right now, Lee wants to fix it. And I would have to say, oh man, God, you got to help me right now, because I can't stand to look at this guy now. I'd be afraid to know. Well, I'm sure it wasn't good. I am sure it was not good back then. Now it's different. Now I hear stuff. I have heard so much stuff from so many people. I'm not even surprised when I hear a literal horror story. I've had pastors come to me and tell me stuff that I'm like, why are you telling this to me? But I'm just going to sit there, you know, and I'm like, I still believe God wants to help you, you know. And I believe that when God brings somebody to you, no matter how terrible their story is, no matter what they're confessing to you, or no matter what a family member tells you was done to them, we still got to be ready to try to help that person. I don't know how we got off on counseling here, but I guess counseling is communication. But there are a couple things you need to know if you're going to counsel people. By law, if you are an ordained minister or any type of a licensed or credentialed counselor, by law, if you know someone is going to hurt someone or going to take someone's life, you are required by law. If you know someone is going to commit suicide, you are required by law to report that. You know, you can say, well, it's against my religion, but the courts do not care. If you had pre-knowledge and they go through with something, the court will hold you as an accessory to that crime. You don't want to do that, so just be aware of that too. There was a time when I was counseling a lot that I used to always go over that with people, especially people I didn't know. Because when you get a reputation for counseling and actually helping people, you will have people you don't know come to you because they don't want their pastor to know what they're doing. That's real common. And so you have people come from other churches that want to come to you for counseling. And they'll tell you things. And so I got to where, especially if I didn't know them, if they didn't go to my church and I already knew pretty much what they were about, I would tell them, I'd say, before we get started, I want to make this clear. First of all, I think you should be going to your pastor. But for whatever reason, I usually kind of had an idea why, especially when you get into it. I would say, but for whatever reason, it's my pleasure to spend this time with you. Second thing I'd tell them, I'd say, the second thing I want you to know is that there are a couple of laws that are out of my hands. If you're going to reveal to me or disclose to me that there is any type of ongoing violence, danger to the life or the health of another person or your own life, I'm required by law to make that known. Yes, I have reported people. I have reported people, yeah, because I had to. But I don't do it behind their back. I tell them immediately. I say, you realize because you told me that I'm required by law to report that? What do they act like? Most of the time, they would not have come to you, but most of the time, they wouldn't have come to you, but what they already knew you were going to do it. You know? Some preachers, and I can honestly say that there have been things I haven't reported, because I honestly felt like it was really in their past. You know what I mean? It wasn't going on today. They showed no indication they were going to do it anymore. We're talking more about things that are presently happening, or claims or threats that are made to the future concerning a person. But most of the time, I just tell them, you know that if you tell me that I have to report that. And where I report stuff, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that I don't like the organization, but it's the only place I know to go, and that's Human Services. I've tried before the police department, and I find out that, now I can't say this about every police department, but I'm referring to places I have lived, that in the police department, they blow things out of proportion. It gets out of hand, but it's like they all immediately they go into, Yes, they want to rush over and start arresting people, and it's embarrassing, and their focus is to protect and serve, whereas Human Services, I don't like them because a lot of times they're not good in the way they do things. They're unfair. They'll take kids out of the home immediately without investigating and that type of stuff, but their focus is to try to restore the relationship, and so I'll go that route. If you're not a senior pastor, don't ever get in a situation where you are counseling to where people won't allow you to talk to your pastor. I mean, if you're not the senior pastor, you can always tell people, or you can have them sign a document if you want, but our pastor will always be informed in anything that I feel that you tell me is pertinent to his or her understanding about how they can better help you as an individual too. They need to know what's going on. So if you have a problem with that, then you need to find somebody else to counsel you. And it's a protection to you, okay? So because you need to be able to go to the senior pastor, especially if it's someone in the church, and you need to say, hey, pastor, I'm talking to this couple, and here's some situations here. Now, you're going to have some people that are going to say, well, that's why I came to you. I don't want him to know. I don't want her to know. You just need to tell them, hey, they are your pastor. They're not there. They don't go around thinking good or bad about you. They think about Jesus doing a work in your life, helping you. If you have a need in your life, you may think nobody knows, but people know. People don't know all the details, but they know you need something from God. They know that, you've got some wounds and some hurts and there's some problems. So don't run away from the help that you can get. Your pastor is there to help you. That's what I tell people. You've chosen to come to me, no problem. But I am going to relate to the pastor any information that I feel he or she needs to know. And I just tell them, because you don't want to operate on your own like that. Since we're talking about communication, I always use a process that they use in chaplaincy. And I have my staff, I've already begun to initiate this at our little church. And I have people write progress notes. And we have a locked file cabinet. And that file cabinet is only accessible to people who we have qualified and we have said can counsel. And it's not there for perusal. You know what I mean? I just need to get some juicy information today. I'm bored. No, you don't go read people's progress notes unless you are going to be counseling them. Then you want to know what Pastor Lee said to them. You want to know what they said to Pastor Lee. And so progress notes basically are just a brief overview of what happened. And you basically want to describe the counselee came in, the two were seated. I could tell there was a little bit of tension in the air. You see what I'm doing? You describe it. What did they reveal to me? What did we discuss? Then you want to say, what homework did I assign? How do I feel like the progress is going to go? And what do we need to follow up on? See, that way, I'm on vacation, and that person comes back for an appointment for counseling next week, and I'm not here, but you're here. I've already said you're qualified to counsel. You go pull the file, you read the progress notes, you're immediately up to speed. And the first thing you can do when they come in, did you get your homework done that Pastor Lee gave you? You see what's happening? And then when they start talking, and where they left off last week, you've read the progress notes. You have a general idea of what was discussed, what we said you need to work on, and you can go forward with them. That's good communication. And it's good communication that helps people. Follow-up is essential. It's essential, okay? But you keep those things locked up so that only the people who need access can have access. Yes, sir. 3 o'clock. Yes, sir. Empathy and encouragement. Empathy is trying to see things from another person's point of view. When communicating with others, try not to be judgmental or biased by preconceived ideas or beliefs. Instead, view situations and responses from the other person's perspective. Stay in tune with your own emotions to help enable you to understand the emotions of others. If appropriate, offer your personal viewpoint clearly and honestly to avoid confusion. Reading Matthew 7, 1 through 4. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. And then also that was Galatians 6, 1, I'm sorry. And Matthew 7, 1 through 4 says, judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and look, a plank is in your own eye? So we're wanting to bear in mind that some subjects might be taboo or too emotionally stressful for others to discuss. We want to offer words and actions of encouragement as well as praise to others. Make other people feel welcome, wanted, valued, and appreciated in your communications. If you let others know that they are valued, they're more likely to give you their best in return. You want to try to ensure that everyone involved in an interaction or communication is included through effective body language and the use of open questions. Ephesians 4:29 we've read several times, but it's good to read it again. Let no corrupt word proceed from your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. There are conversational skills that we want to have, we want to learn and develop in our lives. And keep in mind that conversation or interaction between another person, communication, is supposed to be pleasant and enjoyable. Conversations involve personal interactions between two or more people about something of interest. But many people worry about having conversations. They're concerned that they won't be able to keep the conversation going or about what they will say. Keeping a conversation going is something of an art and one which many of us now seem to lack. So what is conversation anyway? One definition of conversation is intercourse, talk, familiar discourse, behavior, or deportment. In other words, conversation is simply talking to someone else, and usually in an informal way. So why is it considered difficult? It certainly wasn't for our grandparents' generation. Some commentators have put the problem down to the growth of social media, with its emphasis on broadcasting and its me focus. This certainly doesn't make it any easier. And we know that's true, basically. You go in places today and you see people everywhere and they're all looking down at their phone. You know, people come into a lobby or a foyer somewhere to sit and wait, and they can have every seat can be full and nobody's talking to anybody. They're all, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, you're supposed to be watching the entertainment. Yeah. No, don't make sense. You know.
As far as this generation is concerned, we tried. We took up phones when we went to camp, and we didn't give them back until we were heading back home for camp. So we tried, and they did well. So we're trying to make a dent.
Hey, more power to you. That's great. That's good. The rules of conversation. Conversation is a two-way street. The first and most important rule of conversation is that it is not all about you, but it's not all about the other person either. A monologue in either direction is not a conversation. Try to achieve a balance between talking and listening in any conversation. Have you ever tried to talk to somebody that just went on and on and on and on and on about themselves, and then all of a sudden you'd think, a positive sign, they would say, let's talk about you. And now let me tell you this about me. Before you can even get a word in, they start back talking about themselves again. You know, what do you start thinking? I don't want to hear nothing else about you. I want out of here. This is where social media makes life difficult. We're used to broadcasting our views and then responding if others comment. That can feel like the start of a conversation, but when you're face to face, it's not polite to start by broadcasting your views. Instead, you try asking a question to establish a common ground. For examples, what do you do? Or even, isn't the weather beautiful? Just something to get people talking so you can get on the same page with them. Here's a good tip. Everyone likes to be listened to be asked for their views. If the conversation lags or you feel that you're talking more than you should, useful questions could include, what do you think about this? If you're not getting much response, try something like, but maybe you aren't following whatever the subject is you're talking about. What are you interested in? Be friendly and polite. People like people who act like they like them. Smiling and being nice will take you a long way in conversational terms. Everyone would rather chat to someone friendly and pleasant. But what are the practical elements of this? Well, you're building rapport, for one thing. You can build rapport by establishing some common ground and by simply smiling and using positive and reinforcing body language. Be nice. Don't say unpleasant things about anyone. After all, the person you're talking about could be your new acquaintance's best friend. And even if they're not, your new acquaintance may not relish discussion about someone behind their back. And really, none of us should. Proverbs 11:13 says, a talebearer reveals secrets, but he is of a faithful spirit conceals a matter. Try to avoid contentious topics on first acquaintance. It's fine to talk about politics once you know someone a bit better. But when you first meet someone, though it's better to stick to neutral ground, which is why so many people talk about the weather, this is where small talk comes in. Small talk, some people will they think it's not important, it's chit-chat, it's minor, it's uncontentious issues such as the weather, recent news, and items of the hobbies. They think it's a waste of time, but the truth is that that's how you get a conversation going with someone. You're sitting in the barbershop, and guys will sit at a barbershop, they're waiting their turn, and generally they'll start talking. Boy, it's a beautiful day outside, somebody will say. And somebody else will say, yeah, it really is. Man, that was a really rainy day when the game was played the other day. What happened? We just opened the door to conversation. And it all started with chit-chat. So these are important things. If you're not interested in the conversation, just bring the conversation to a close politely. Perhaps by saying something like, I need to go and catch this and that before they leave. It's been really nice to chat with you. Or please excuse me, I promised to help with something, and I see that they need me now. The idea here is you don't have to say, I don't like what we're talking about, or your opinion sucks, or something like that. You can just politely go. Get out of the conversation. If you know it's a conversation you don't want to be a part of. And we all end up in those sometimes. And just dismiss yourself politely and let it go. Respond to what they're saying. To respond genuinely to what someone has just said means that you have to listen. You can't just switch off and think about what you're going to say next. However, if we're honest, most of us would admit that we often do just that. You're just talking to me, and all I can think about is what my next comment's going to be. That's not communication because I'm not hearing you. I am thinking about me and my interests. It's all about my agenda, see? And that's not healthy. It's important to focus on the other person and what they're saying. You also need to take into account their body language. If you find it difficult to think of something to say in response, try using some filler sentences such as, that's just so interesting. You're really making me think hard. Or just comment something positive. Oh goodness, that's challenging. I need to think about this. I've never thought about it that way before. I didn't grow up in a family where my dad was interested in sports and things like that. I played sports as a kid, but once I got older, it just never really caught on with me. I didn't learn to hunt. I don't, you know what I'm saying? So for me, when I get around a lot of guys, my hobby, my major interest is the Lord. I'm just being real. It's the Lord. It's ministry. I do like to read. But even most of what I read, it either deals with ministry concepts and aspects or the Bible or maybe leadership. And so sometimes I feel awkward around a bunch of guys when they're all talking guy stuff. It's not because I'm not a guy. I'm as much of a guy as a guy. But It's just that I don't know. I don't know who these sports stars they are that they talk about. I don't know what it feels like to shoot a deer. I mean, I enjoyed shooting a compound bow, but I never had a chance to shoot an animal other than a dog. But, you know, it's, well, that was deserved. But I don't do those kind of things. So, well, you follow what I'm saying? So I have to sometimes just try to use polite, oh, man, that's really interesting, or something like that, because I don't know what to say. But when we get on a topic I understand, then I enjoy interjecting my thoughts and opinions in it. You can talk to anybody about anything if you can just be friendly and listen and just be positive. Using signaling to help the other person. When a conversation is flowing well, it moves naturally from one person to the other. However, if one or both are finding it more of a struggle than chat, you may find it helpful to use signals to show the other person that it's their turn to talk. The most common type of signal is questions. These may be either open or closed, and we talked about this earlier. Closed questions invite yes or no answers, and open questions invite more information. They open up the conversation to the other person and invite them to participate. For this reason, in conversation, they often are called invitations. Open questions often start with how, why, what, where, these type of things. Create emotional connections when you're talking with people. Of course, it's perfectly possible to conduct a conversation entirely at the level of small talk with nothing important being said. Interesting thing happened. I don't know how old you are or how you came about, but I look at my sons, which 3 of them are married and grown, have children, families, and they've been married for several years. And my youngest one, he is just out of college and he's single. But with all of them, their generation, dating and stuff was not like my generation. In my generation, you saw a young lady as a guy that you were attracted to. You introduce yourself, you met them, and you might say, hey, you want to go get a Coke? You want to do something? Usually it was not, hey, you know what I mean? It was like, just, you want to do something, okay? And that was sometimes even questionable whether it was really a date or just, we're going to go get a Coke. Y'all, was anybody like that? But then you kind of would see how that went, and then you would say, would you like to go out to a movie or go to dinner or something? And then everybody kind of started knowing that this is going to the next level here, maybe. Maybe this is a date. With my boys, they'd come home, especially the older ones, I guess it was more around the 2000 year or so, that they would come home and say, I'd say, you guys got a date or you going out to be with a girl or something this weekend? You know what I'm trying to find out what they were doing. And they would say, well, I'm talking to somebody. And I'm like, I talk to people all the time, but I ain't going out on a date. And man, I'm telling you, a month later, did you and that girl ever get together? We're still talking. I'm like, dear Lord, still talking? It was different. I don't know how it was for y'all. It was different for me. But if we didn't have a connection within a day or two, I done moved on. You know what I'm saying? In other words, this one ain't working. I'm going to the next person if I'm, if there is one. You get the point. But it wasn't that way for my older boys. I don't know how it is with Tim because he was away at college. But I don't know. It just seems like communication changes with different generations. I'm glad they're talking. I'm glad they're getting to know each other. I'm glad, that most of their time together is spent over the internet on the phone. It is, isn't it?
They'll never know that. Part of that's the paper that I wrote, so I kind of wrote on this kind of stuff. But they'll never know what it feels like ever to call somebody's house and pray that their parents don't answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Using the rotary phones.
Right. Or to call after 9 o'clock and be like, I hope I don't get this, that kind of, because everything's instant and private.
It is, isn't it?
And, it's a very different relationship.
It's a different world. It really is. It's crazy. How do people get married now? They don't.
When my kids were in elementary, their idea of a date was eating lunch with their friends.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because they said, well, we had a date the other day. When you have a date?
Yeah.
I mean, they just threw me for a loop, and I'm like, okay, I could live with that. But it was the generation before this one was even
It is.
than they are now.
Yeah, it's just everything changes, It's just, I don't know. I guess we used to laugh at our parents, and now they're laughing at us. I don't know.
I'm kind of glad that's the kind of thing they did, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sad to say I've embraced my father's philosophy that this is the dumbest generation to be on the planet sometimes. Because I know he said that about mine.
Yeah. Okay, create emotional connections is what we're kind of talking about there. Conversation is always a way to get to know someone better and build relationships with them. It can be useful to understand how to use conversation to create and build emotional connections. The key is sharing appropriate information. That means being prepared to be open about what interests you and what makes you into you as a person, and inspiring the other person to share too. This sharing doesn't have to be big stuff. It can be as simple as, it's so great having this beautiful weather. It means that I can go fishing this weekend. That leaves the field open for the other person to say, oh, do you fish? I enjoy fishing too. Where do you go? Or, yes, it's lovely weather. I went for a walk myself. It's great for the outside, to be outside, isn't it? Or even I find the heat difficult myself, but the kids love going to the lake. And so all we're really doing here is just discussing ways that you can carry communication. You can initiate it and carry it through with people. All different responses, but all sharing an emotional connection with the other person and keeping the conversation flowing. Be interested, and you will be interesting. Do you know that's so true? If I act interested in what somebody says, I may not say anything, but that's nice. But if I really pay attention and listen and act interested, they go away thinking I am interesting. And they don't know anything about me. But it's the way we are, because we feel we have something of interest to share. And so if I feel like I have something of interest to share and you don't listen to it, then what is wrong with you? You're not interesting. Well, I didn't say anything anyway. So, but that's kind of how it works. In turn, if you let me back up here. All these ideas can be boiled down into one idea. If you're interested in others and in the world around you, you will be interesting to talk to. And that in turn will make conversations flow, because you genuinely want to know about the other person, and you'll be able to contribute to the conversation from your own interest in the world. On the other hand, if you take no interest in anything except yourself, you'll be quite dull, and people will not be interested in having any conversations with you. You have been warned. Okay, section 3, nonverbal communication. Maybe you're saying more than you think. Enhancing the meaning. The interpersonal communication is much more than the explicit meaning of words, the information or message conveyed. Using our voice is only the tip of the iceberg. We actually communicate far more information, using nonverbal communication. Implicit messages, whether they're intentional or not, are expressed through nonverbal behaviors. This includes nonverbal signals and gestures, facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, the physical distance between communicators, and even our appearance. These nonverbal signals give clues and additional information and meaning over and above verbal communication. You know how this works. I could be up here telling you about what an awesome time we had in Brazil, but if I don't, look excited, if I don't kind of use some body language to accentuate that, then you may think, oh, they had a nice time. It was, his words are positive, but his body language doesn't really, communicate the full expression of what real excitement is thought to be. On the other hand, I can say, man, we had an awesome time. You see what I'm doing with my hands? It comes natural. We had an awesome time. People were so wonderful. God just moved and people's lives were changed, everything. Then now you get a little bit deeper message, because my whole body is communicating to you. It accentuates that message. Nonverbal communication helps people reinforce or modify what is said in words. For example, people may nod their heads vigorously when saying yes, to emphasize that they agree with the other person. But a shrug of the shoulders and a sad expression when saying, I'm fine, thanks, may imply that things are not really fine at all. You see, the body expression overrides the statement of I'm fine. because my body says to you, I'm really not fine. So we have a tendency to go more by body language than we do the words we hear. Do you feel sick today? I feel fine. I'm okay. Well, you're thinking, man, he don't feel too good. But he said he feels okay. But his body language does not communicate. So that's the idea we're talking about. You want to convey information about the emotional state, define or reinforce the relationship between people, provide feedback to the other person, and regulate the flow of communication. For example, by signaling to others that they have finished speaking or wish to say something else. So when we signal to people, that just tells them it's your turn to talk. Go ahead, Sometimes we do that by looking at them. We'll be talking and we're glancing eye to eye, making contact, and all of a sudden I come to a conclusion and I'll look, and you immediately know it's my turn to talk. Sometimes we'll do like this. It's unconscious we're doing, but you can do it consciously, to help people know when it's their turn. Interpreting and nonverbal communication, it's a language of its own, basically. Many popular books on nonverbal communication present this topic as if it were a language that can be learned. The implication being that if the meaning of every nod, every eye movement, and gesture were known, the real feelings and intentions of a person would be understood. This, of course, is absolutely true. In psychology, they have a science of where it's, they basically are able to read people's body language, their facial expressions, and I mean, it's so detailed that they know that a smile to the left side of the face means something totally different than a smile to the right side of the face. Literally to the point to where if one eyebrow is raised while the other remains down, we don't even know we do these things, but people as a whole have similar body language and facial expressions that actually indicate what's coming from the heart and not from the head. So I can, they can say, did you break in that bank and rob it? And I can say, absolutely not. But I can't control certain things in my facial expression that a scientist knows. If that eyebrow goes whoop like that, no matter how convincing I sounded, the dude robbed the bank. You see what I'm saying? And they practice and learn these things. And that's why you'll see sometimes psychologists will work in investigation, police, work on the police force, in different fields like that, because they have trained in these types of expressions and body language and things of that nature. And so it helps them get to places and get the truth out of situations. Let's see. Nonverbal communication is not a language with a fixed meaning. It is influenced and driven by the context in which it occurs. This includes both the place and the people concerned, as well as the culture. A nod of the head between colleagues in a committee meeting may mean something very different from when the same action is used to acknowledge someone across a crowded room. And again, when two people are having a social conversation. It is funny how that we do understand a lot of this. For example, this example right here, across in a boardroom or something. And a lot of the understanding that comes is because of prior knowledge. Are you with me? And let's just say that one of my associates and I are sitting across from each other in a boardroom and we're discussing some business transaction. And all of a sudden I go like this. And I do what's mentioned here. I nod like that. That person probably is going to know exactly what I meant by that. All right? Which it may not mean at all what people would judge it to mean. If somebody saw it, they might think, oh, he's agreeing now. He's fixing to buy into this deal. When in actuality, it might mean now's time to bail out of this deal. Or now's the time to disclose something secret. In other words, with prior knowledge, it makes sometimes body language more understandable and more contemplative. You could see it between the opposite sex. You see, sometimes you'll see people sitting in a room, I'm talking about hopefully single people, and they take an interest in each other. People know the difference between someone who's looking at me just because they're looking at me and someone who's looking at me because they're looking at me. You with me? And usually the eyes or the expressions that come back to them will indicate to them whether I'm saying I am looking at you two or I am looking at you. Hello? That's how, y'all know what I'm talking about? Y'all are human, right? Well, this is human nature. Human nature knows that body language is powerful in communicating. Interpersonal communication is further complicated because it's usually not possible to interpret a gesture or expression accurately on its own. Nonverbal communication consists of a complete package of expressions, hand and eye movements, postures, gestures, which should be interpreted along with speech and verbal communication. So again, let me remind you, prior knowledge can play a big part in communication, especially if it's nonverbal. Also, there are common expressions of nonverbal communication. If you come to knock on my door and you're standing at my door and I go like this, how many of you know what that means? Come into my house, right? I would probably say, please come on in, like that. But actually, the strongest expression, it's stronger than even my words of invitation, are my signals. They're my body language, you see. And so that person comes into the house. How I welcome them into the home determines how well our communication will go when we're in there communicating. If I say, and they stand there at the door, and I stand there looking at them for a minute or so, and I say, well, come on in. Right? Okay, they know I've been allowed to come in, but there's a reserved feeling of like, I didn't really feel like they really were expecting me or they really wanted me to come in. You see the difference? You know, I kind of stood there like that. Well, come on in. You know, and sometimes we might not even think about how we are actually communicating. Cultural context. The good news is that most of us learn to interpret nonverbal communication as we grow up. It is a normal part of how we communicate with other people, and most of us use it and interpret it quite unconsciously. This can make it harder to interpret consciously. However, if you stop thinking about it, you will probably find that you have a very good idea of what somebody meant. So sometimes you just need to let it speak for itself. If you start trying to watch for things, you'll start picking up on things that aren't intended. You know, I don't think anybody likes me here. And all of a sudden, you'll start seeing things that aren't intended. Somebody will be looking right at you, but they're not looking at you, and turn their head away, and you think, see there? See there? They don't even want to look at me. So a lot of the nonverbal is not something we intentionally set out to try to read with people. A lot of it is a subconscious communication that goes on, but it is very strong. It very highly influences what we are receiving and taking in. Let's see. In the cultural context, this can make it harder to interpret consciously, we said. However, if we stop thinking about it, then it'll be easier. The bad news is that nonverbal communication can be very cultural specific. Examples of some of these things would be the popular stereotype of Italians, involving big gestures, lots of hand waving, and plenty of loud and excited shouting may be a stereotype. But it exists for a reason. In the Italian custom, our culture, excitement is shown a lot more obviously than in the UK, for example. And nonverbal communication tends to be a lot more obvious. This can make it much harder for Italians to interpret nonverbal communication in the UK or the US, where it is more subtle. However, even in Italy, there are geographical verifications. So even in cultural regions, things can be different in certain areas. But overall, you might find a common way of things. And everybody knows the Italians are, like this, and they're big all hands and everything, and they're loud and dramatic. And if you've ever been to the UK, they're just the most non-responsive people. Have a jolly good day. They can't even say, have a jolly good day. Have a jolly good day. And you want to go, I see yours isn't too jolly. But actually they're fine. It's a culture of how they relate and do things. The thumbs up gesture, which generally signals approval in English-speaking countries, is considered offensive in other countries, including Greece, Italy, and some parts of the Middle East. Making an okay gesture with a thumb and a forefinger. Making a circle with your thumb and forefinger like this means okay. We talked about this morning. In Western cultures, it is used in particular by divers in this way in Japan. However, it's the sign for money in an Arabic country, and it's a threat. So again, different cultures, different signs, different communications. It's worth being careful how you use gestures and body language. The importance of nonverbal communication is essential that we understand this. And there are some nonverbal cues. When we communicate, nonverbal cues can be as important, or in some cases even more important, than what we say. Nonverbal communication can have a great impact on the listener and the outcome of the communication. People tend to have much less conscious control over their nonverbal messages than of what they are actually saying. And this is partly because nonverbal communication is much more emotional in nature and therefore much more instinctive. If there is a mismatch between the two, you should probably trust the nonverbal message rather than the words used. A lack of nonverbal message may also signal of sorts, suggesting that the speaker is carefully controlling their body language and maybe trying to hide their true emotions. Okay? And so here's some types of these nonverbal communications. The types of nonverbal communication are not expressed verbally with speech. They are called nonverbal because they include body movements, posture, eye contact, where the amount of eye contact often determines the level of trust and trustworthiness. Paralanguage, or aspects of the voice apart from speech, such as pitch, tone, and speed of speaking. Closeness. You know that Americans associate fast talking with power, with excitement. If I start talking real fast like this, somebody will say, oh man, he got anointed there on that one point. No, I was just talking fast. But we associate certain things with certain different vocal tones. I can't sing. I can't carry a tune. I never have been able to. I'm tone deaf. But I was, when we first started pastoring, I was in a situation where I actually had to leave the singing with no ability to do it. And my mother-in-law happened to be there one Sunday. She was laughing at me. And she told me afterwards, she said, you did a great job. She says, what was funny was, she said, instead of changing keys, and she knew that I didn't know anything about music, anything about tones or pitch or anything. She said, instead of changing keys, you just sing faster. And I said, you know, you're right. Because I didn't know how to change pitch or keys or things. I don't even hear those kind of things. Well, sometimes we get accustomed to the fact that we think that things like, I'll use preaching for example. We think that loud preaching is more powerful than quiet teaching. We really do. And all it is a communication style. What makes any communication powerful is its content and the clarity of the message. But what helps people relate to it sometimes depends on what their, how shall I say this, what their preference or style is. Some people love just teaching, like I'm just teaching today. Some people like, well, the Lord said, and they want you to just, you know, rhyme and do all this and everything. And the louder you get, though, they get excited. But actually, the real power, the real impact of the communication that takes place is really determined by how much did you get? What did you understand? How clear was it? The style is supposed to help you grasp the meaning. And it doesn't make any difference what style it is. It's no more wrong to be a loud, emotional preacher than it is to be a quiet, soft-spoken person who speaks in outlines and teaching form. Doesn't matter. Here's the bottom line. Did you get anything? Did you get the message that was intended? But we have a real tendency, and I find this everywhere I go just about, to prefer certain styles. Over in the UK, they are not interested in loud preaching at all. As a matter of fact, they associate it with prosperity preachers and preachers that have fallen into sin and everything. And they say Americans all scream and holler when they preach and then take your money. That's what they say in the UK. In the UK, you can't take their money. They won't give any anyway. But they like dry, quiet teaching that a lot of Americans would go, but they eat that up. But you know what? That's their temperament and their personality anyway. And we tend to like what we are like. Okay? Eye contact, paralanguage, closeness or personal space, which determines the level of intimacy. Some people in some cultures don't want you getting near to them. You're in my space, they'll say. Other cultures want you to get close to them. Brazilians and even Latin people, all Latin people, Hispanic people, are closer people. They don't feel uncomfortable if you get in their space. Matter of fact, it makes them feel better. You know, they feel like we have a relationship. But if you don't ever get close to me, if you don't give me a hug, y'all understand what I'm saying? Then maybe there's something wrong in our relationship. North America, more than in the northern part of the U.S., more than the South. In the South, we're pretty lovey-dovey. But up north, you don't go up and hug somebody. You know, that's not what they do up there. You shake hands if you get one offered to you. I'm talking about in church. You go to church, they ain't all hugging up on each other. In church, no. They may shake hands and greet at the door, but the rest of the time, you won't see these people showing affection very much and things like that. Nothing wrong with them. That's just the way that they culturally were raised. However, if you go up there as a southerner and start hugging on people, they're going to label you as weird real fast. Okay? And they have a hard time assimilating into our culture. Well, these things are about communication. Facial expressions, including smiling, frowning, and even blinking. Psychological changes, for example, sweating or blinking more when nervous. If you have a problem with anxiety, or you get nervous speaking or communicating or talking to people, maybe you're meeting somebody that you really think a lot of and you're just real nervous in their presence, you need to realize that and know this, that most people are thinking just as well of you as that you are of them, and that they're not going to know that you're nervous or excited unless you show it. You see what I mean? So if you can relax and just go about it and have a nice communication with them. Nonverbal communication.
A lot of times it's the other way too, though.
It is.
Middle Eastern people.
Is a vital part of understanding and communication. Some estimates suggest that speech only makes up 20 to 30% of communication. The rest of the information is conveyed nonverbally by tone or voice, facial expressions, eye contact, gestures, how we stand, and so on. Body language or body movements include gestures, posture, head and hand movements, or whole body movements. Body movements can be used to reinforce or emphasize what a person is saying, and also offer information about the emotions and the attitudes of a person. However, it is also possible for body movements to conflict with what is said. A skilled observer may be able to detect such discrepancies in behavior and use them as a clue to what someone is really feeling and thinking. There are several different categories of body movement, and these include things like emblems. Emblems are gestures that serve the same function as a word. For example, the signal that means okay, come here, or the hand movement used when hitchhiking. However, be aware that while some emblems are international, recognized everywhere, others may need to be interpreted in the cultural context. Illustrators is another one. Gestures which accompany words to illustrate a verbal message. For example, the common circular hand movement which accompanies the phrase over and over again. You know this. Over and over again. Right? Okay? Or nodding the head in a particular direction when saying over there. Someone has said, where's that book? And you go, over there. What are you saying? On that shelf right there. You know, in that direction. Regulators, gestures used to give feedback when conversing. Examples of these include head nods, short sounds such as uh-huh, mm-hmm, and expressions of interest or boredom. Regulators allow the other person to adapt his or her speech to reflect the level of interest in agreement. Without receiving feedback, many people find it difficult to maintain a conversation. However, they may vary in different cultural contexts. This is another good example of the difference between men and women. Women do really good with regulators. Women, you're talking along and the husband's sitting there and he's watching TV and reading a book or something, and she's trying to tell him about her day, and she's going on, and he does not say a word. You know, it's just like and she says, "Are you listening to me?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm listening to you." Well, she says, you're not listening to me. You're not interested in what I'm saying. He goes, I heard every word you said. And actually, men are poor at using regulators because we don't help the conversation at all, guys. We need to learn how to use regulators. Now, if she's talking to her girlfriend, she says to her girlfriend, this is how my day went. And the girlfriend's going, oh, yes, okay, And boy, they're just having this wonderful time communicating and talking. And she's going, why can't my husband do that? Well, I'll tell you the reason why. Men don't use regulators because men don't want to commit to something until they've heard the whole story. So a man will not interject regulators because he thinks that a man's a man, and when a man thinks if he says then he thinks it's all settled. I have committed to buy her that new couch. I haven't heard the details. It's over with. I said Women don't go that way. Women just want you to say, when you say, she says, it's got big, beautiful flowers. And she thinks, at that point, she expects you to be like her girlfriend. She expects you to go, oh, okay. Do you like those big flowers on the couch? He just sits there and looks at them. The girlfriend says, oh, I love them, I love them, I love them. And she's just enjoying the conversation. But with the husband, she's getting really frustrated. But if she'll go on and tell the full story, even though he won't give any regulators, he won't encourage her in it, at the end, he'll probably say, you can buy the couch, or I don't think we should buy the couch. You see what I mean? But many times conversation breaks down because of the missing regulators. She gets frustrated, goes off into the back of the house. They never finish the conversation because he wasn't communicating. How many of you understand, guys? Ladies, you understand? So the next time when you're trying to sell a new couch to your husband, finish the story. Just go ahead and keep talking and keep telling him whatever it is you want to tell him, and he's listening, and he'll say yes or no once he's heard the whole story and he can think about it. It's just the difference in men and women, and that means we need to work on being better communicators, both men and women. Are we okay on that? Adapters. Nonverbal behaviors which satisfy some physical or psychological need. These include such actions as scratching or adjusting uncomfortable glasses or biting fingernails when nervous. Although normally subconscious, adapters are more likely to be restrained in public places than in private, where they are less likely to be noticed. Adaptive behaviors often accompany feelings of anxiety or hostility. If you bite your fingers, then you probably have an anxiety problem. And if you will stop and think about it, when your fingers hurt the most, it's when you have been in the most social type settings and situations, if that's where your phobia is. If it's some other type of phobia or anxiety, then you'll notice that after being in one of those situations, your fingers hurt because you bit them down low. Okay? It's not a conscious thing. We don't go, I think I'll bite my fingers now. What happens is that inside of our system, we feel stress. And the way that we relieve that stress is with a distraction. And it starts out by biting fingers. Some people scratch their head all the time. Okay? Some people tap their foot. You ever try to talk to somebody and it's just annoying the fire out of you? It's like you want to go, stop it! Well, what it is that person, something about the environment right now is making them uncomfortable. They may not be conscious of it. They may be conscious of it. But what they're doing is they're distracting themselves. It's kind of like when you fly. They tell you that if you have problems with flying, if you get real anxious and have problems with anxiety or panic attacks on an airplane, you should put a rubber band on your wrist. And every time you feel the anxiety begin to build, you pop the rubber band. And you'll see somebody occasionally on an airplane, they're sitting there, and when they start getting in turbulence, they're going, man, they're just turning their wrist blood red. But it works. And the reason is because it tells your brain, focus on the pain. Focus on the pain, brain. And the brain can focus on many things, but there are certain things in the brain that when it focuses on, it can't focus on something else. This is one of those things. It's just a natural way of doing things. And so there's just all kinds of little interesting things about the brain like that. But and even that is communication. It's communicating to your brain that you don't like the way it's operating, so you're going to alter its database and make it respond differently. It works. Okay? So 302. Okay. Let's talk about posture, and we'll stop here. Posture can reflect emotions, attitudes, and intentions. Research has identified a wide range of postural signals and their meanings, such as open and closed posture. We talked about that. Let's go over here to mirroring. Mirroring. Notice the way a loving couple relate to each other. Often you will see that partners' postures will match, as if one partner is a mirror reflection of the other. For instance, if one partner drapes an arm over the back of the chair, this might be replicated by the other person's position. If one partner frowns, it could be reflected in the other partner's facial expression. This mirroring indicates interest and approval between people. You know how they say that old people start to look alike? You know? Well, they're not really looking alike. What it is they start, first of all, they pick up characteristics. I know that I do a lot of things now the way my wife does them that I didn't used to do. And she does some things the way I do them that she didn't used to do that way. So as you get old, you become like each other in your decisiveness, in how you do certain behavior. But it's even deeper than that. We begin to reflect each other's expressions, emotional language, body language, and things like that. We pick it up subconsciously. And so what makes older people sometimes look like each other, brothers and sisters sometimes instead of husband and wife, it's not that they physically do, it's that they have such similar mannerisms and styles of communication that you start thinking, man, they're so much alike. No wonder they've been married 40 years. No, the reason they're so much alike is because they've been married 40 years. You just can't help it. You start to reflect and mirror who you spend time with. You can watch even people, sometimes it's fun, just come to a meeting or something that you're not going to be involved in, leadership in or something, and just sit over like on the couch or something and watch the crowds and watch how people will mirror. It's the funniest thing to me. And I don't want to pick on ladies, but ladies are even worse than men. Women have such a need. The number one mental health problem with women in America is inferiority. And so women want so badly to be accepted because women have been oppressed in our culture. And, today things are better, but there's still not full equality there. I'm on your side, ladies. Okay? And so, but you'll see women many times. They'll go from talking to one lady in a party, and you can watch them. And y'all try this sometime. Watch them. They'll start out, and they'll be talking, and you can tell whoever the dominant female is. The dominant female will have certain mannerisms. Before long, the other female will begin to use the same mannerisms in the conversation. And vocal tones and stuff. If they have a certain way they say things or a certain expression they use, that other lady will just subconsciously begin to almost mimic and use some of the same terminology and expressions and things. That's where a lot of these silly little, remember the Valley Girl movement? That was a girl movement. That's what it was. And that is the thing I'm talking about. To be accepted, I'm going to talk that silly and like. You remember how they used to do that? And like, what are you going to do? And like, I'm going home. And we're going, dumb! But they're all thinking, and like, they go in and do it because there's a dominant person in that relationship, and that thing just begins to grow, and it becomes just a way of people doing that type of thing like that. But yeah, you'll see that so much. You'll see people sometimes change their dress styles. New family comes into your church and they come in looking like who they are, at least who they are in the last church. And then within 2 or 3 weeks, the woman's buying new dresses. The man's got a new style. He used to wear suits. Now he's wearing jeans to church. He never wore jeans to church in his life. But what happened? Is he really trying to fit in with the environment because there's new jeans in the church? He's just trying to fit in the environment? No, I'll tell you what he's doing. He's trying to relate and fit into the church. It's not that he's really trying to be like everybody else. He wants everybody else to like him. We do it subconsciously, guys. That's why people will pay $150 for a stinking pair of tennis shoes. That were made for 32 cents in China. Come on. Chinese children, 10 years old, made them tennis shoes. It cost 32 cents to make them tennis shoes, and you and I are going to pay $150. You know why? Because everybody's wearing Nike tennis shoes. We want to be accepted. And so we know that Nike tennis shoes communicate success in America. The Chinese are laughing at us. They're not even leather. These are the cheapest shoes we can make. But we put the Nike little check mark on it, and those crazy Americans will pay $150 for a pair of tennis shoes that don't cost no more than a stick of gum. They're laughing at us. Dong. Hey, it's the world we live in.
Did you say dumb?
Yes. Yeah. Anyway.